the bastard and the stone. To understand the king, we must first understand the darkness that birthed him. Picture the island of Britain in the 5th century. For 400 years, this land had been a province of Rome. It was a land of heated baths, straight roads, stone villas, and the rule of law. But in the year 410 AD, the impossible happened. The Roman legions, the invincible guardians of civilization, marched away. They were recalled to defend the dying heart of the empire in Italy, leaving Britain to fend for itself. It was an abandonment of apocalyptic proportions. Almost overnight, the lights went out. The stone villas crumbled. The roads were reclaimed by the forests. And from the shadows, the wolves began to circle. From the east came the Saxons, the Angles, and the Jutes, sea-born raiders with a thirst for land and blood. From the north came the Picts, the painted warriors who had never been tamed. Britain was a carcass, and the scavengers were tearing it apart. The local chieftains, men who called themselves kings of tiny hills and mud fortresses, fought amongst themselves for the scraps. It was a time of might makes right, a time when the strong did what they could, and the weak suffered what they must. It is here, in this chaos, that the seed of the legend was planted. The history books tell us of a high king named Uther Pendragon, a brutal, powerful warlord who managed to hold the chaos at bay through sheer force of will. But Uther was a man of his time, violent, impulsive, and consumed by desire. His downfall was not on the battlefield, but in his lust for Igraine, the wife of his rival, the Duke of Cornwall. Depending on which tale you believe, Uther's entry into Igraine's bed was either an act of deception aided by the wizard Merlin, or a brutal act of conquest. But the result was the same. A child was conceived in the shadow of war and betrayal. A boy named Arthur. Arthur was born with a death sentence on his head. As a bastard son, or at least a son of questionable legitimacy, born of a scandalous union, he was a target. Every rival warlord, every jealous baron, and even the Saxons would want the boy dead to prevent a new dynasty from rising. And so, enter the architect of the legend, Merlin. Forget the pointy hat and the wand. The Merlin of the Dark Ages would have been something far more terrifying. A druid, a prophet, a political mastermind who saw the threads of fate that others missed. Merlin knew that for the boy to survive, he could not be raised a prince. He had to be raised a man. Arthur was taken from his parents as an infant. He was stripped of his royal name, his silks, and his birthright. He was given to a minor lord, Sir Ector, to be raised in obscurity. This is perhaps the most crucial part of the Arthurian psyche. He did not grow up in a high tower, looking down on the people. He grew up among them. He was raised as a squire to Ector's son Kay. While Kay trained to be a knight, Arthur polished the armor. While Kay learned to ride the war horses, Arthur mucked out the stables. He knew the bite of the cold wind, the ache of hard labor, and the simple, rough camaraderie of the common soldiers. He learned humility before he ever learned authority. He learned that respect is not given by a title, it is earned by the sweat of your brow. While the boy grew strong in the countryside, the kingdom fell apart. Uther Pendragon died, leaving no recognized heir. The realm fractured. It was the interregnum, the time between kings. The Saxons pushed deeper inland, burning churches and libraries. The British warlords turned on each other, acting like crabs in a bucket, pulling down anyone who tried to climb. The land was crying out, not just for a fighter, but for a symbol. And then came the summons. The legends say that the greatest barons and knights of the realm were called to London for a tournament, a grand distraction from the slow death of their nation. It was Christmas Eve, a time of miracles. And there, in the churchyard of Street Paul's, appeared the object that would define a millennium of storytelling. A great block of marble, and upon it, an anvil of steel. And driven through the anvil, deep into the stone, was a naked sword. Engraved in letters of gold were the words, "Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is rightwise king, born of all England." We must pause here to look at the metaphor. Why a sword in a stone? In the Bronze and Iron Ages, the art of smelting metal was seen as magic. To take a rock ore and pull a sword out of it was the divine work of the smith. Perhaps the sword in the stone wasn't a magic trick, but a memory of a technology, the casting of a blade. Or perhaps the stone represented the state of Britain itself. Cold, hard, unyielding, a nation that had turned its back on hope. Many men tried to pull the sword. We can imagine the scene. Massive men, warlords with arms like tree trunks, sweating and grunting, putting their boots against the rock, straining until their veins popped. They pulled with greed. They pulled with ambition. They pulled with the desire to dominate. And the sword did not move. It held fast, rejecting their vanity. Arthur was not even supposed to be there. He was just a squire, a teenager attending to his foster brother, Kay. The story goes that Kay had forgotten his sword at the inn, and Arthur, terrified of his brother missing his match, ran to find a replacement. He saw the sword in the churchyard. He didn't read the inscription. He didn't know the prophecy. He just saw a weapon that could help his brother. He approached the stone. The air didn't crackle with lightning. The clouds didn't part. It was a quiet moment. He gripped the hilt. His hands, calloused from stable work, fit the leather grip perfectly. He didn't pull with the intent to rule. He pulled with the intent to serve. And with a sound like a breath of fresh air, the steel slid free. When Arthur returned to the tournament and handed the sword to Kay, the world shifted on its axis. At first, no one believed it. How could a boy, a squire, a nobody, succeed where the greatest warriors had failed? They made him put it back. They made him do it again, and again, and again. The barons watched with jealousy. The bishops watched with awe. The common people watched with hope. But this is where the Disney version ends and the history begins. In a fairy tale, everyone bows and the credits roll. In reality, when a teenager claims a throne in a land of warlords, the result is not applause, it is war. The northern kings, Lot, Urien, and others refused to kneel to a beardless boy of unknown parentage. They called him an upstart, a bastard, a witch's creation. They drew their own swords, not to salute him, but to kill him. Arthur, standing there with the sword of kings in his hand, realized the terrible truth of power. The sword did not solve his problems. It only created new ones. The stone was easy to conquer. Now, he had to conquer the hearts of men who hated him. He looked to Merlin, his ancient guardian. Merlin offered no magic spells to make the enemies vanish. He offered only advice. The king who serves is the king who leads. Arthur had a choice. He could run, throw the sword back, and live a quiet life. Or he could accept the burden. He could accept that he would have to kill his own countrymen to save them. He could accept that his life was no longer his own, it belonged to Britain. The young man tightened his grip on the hilt. The iron was cold, but his blood was hot. He looked at the gathered armies, the sneering lords, and the frightened commoners. He raised the sword, not in triumph, but in warning. The boy was gone. The king had arrived. And the first thing the king had to do was go to war.